lies that are not clarified and truths that are not told. Hello, invisible friends. I am Logo, and I want to share with you the logical steps we must take if we have a major disease and how to face it while continuing to attend to the treatments and recommendations of your doctors. Nowadays, it is said a lot in the media that we have increased life expectancy. The truth is very false. What has been exceeded is mortality, mainly due to infections. In the case of famines, perhaps the West is much better, but we know that many places in the world continue for various reasons to have hunger and death in these populations. In the case of fatal accidents, we have changed falling from a tree to falling from an airplane, to dying when attacked by a wild animal. We have changed it to being run over by a wild beast at the wheel of a car. In the case of the plagues that decimated half of the population in the Middle Ages, we may find a new one created and released by us humans, since we boast of having biological weapons to destroy this world several times over. We know how lucrative that business is. And those who doubt it should ask themselves, why did they try to patent the COVID-19 virus? And they were denied, since you cannot patent something alive. Death by poisoning in the past, its causes were more by being attacked by a poisonous animal. Usually today, poisoning occurs due to the consumption of industrial substances and pollution, although industrial foods are the largest source. And in the case of wars, death is death either by a club or a laser beam. Life expectancy refers to the potential of years that we should experience before our death, and that time has not varied much or not at all. A perfect example is the ages reached by the following characters of antiquity: Sophocles 90 years, Democritus 90 years, Hippocrates 83 years, Plato 80 years, Isocrates 98 years, Zeno of Citium 98 years, Galen 87 years old, and Lao Tzu 80 years old. Nowadays, death appears due to metabolic disruption, and the number of deaths far exceeds all deaths from the plague in the Middle Ages. And metabolic disruption refers to what we eat and process in our body to build and energize us. In the year 2023 in the world, and we only refer to the majority of cancer cases, more than 10 million deaths per year registered, stroke 19 million, heart attacks 19 million, Alzheimer's and diabetes more than 5 million. For a total of approximately 55 million deaths caused by metabolic dysfunction. Gravity is impressive, and not wanting to know the basics, what really feeds us and how we handle energy. The irony is that historically, by trial and error, the benefits of a diet with a low intake of sugars and starches to stay healthy were already known. Even in the Bible, fasting is mentioned to give a written example. Luigi Cornaro was a 16th century Venetian nobleman known for his writings on dietary moderation and calorie restriction. At age 35, Cornaro was seriously ill and decided to change his eating habits on the advice of his doctors. He adopted a very strict diet, consuming only what was necessary to stay alive. In his best-known work, Discorsi della vita sobria, Cornaro describes his diet, which included foods such as bread, eggs, meat, and broth. Their daily ration was approximately 400 grams of solid food and 500 grams of wine. Cornaro believed that this diet allowed him to live a long and healthy life, reaching the age of 98 according to some accounts. William Banting was a 19th century English businessman who popularized a low-carb diet in 1863. In his famous pamphlet titled Letter on Corpulence, addressed to the public, Banting described his struggle with obesity and how he managed to lose weight by following a diet recommended by his doctor, William Harvey. Banting's diet consisted of 4 meals a day, which included meat, vegetables, fruits, and dry wine, avoiding sugar, starchy foods, beer, milk, and butter. This approach was revolutionary in its time and laid the groundwork for many modern low-carb diets. The doctor who published a diet to prevent diabetes in the late 1800s was Frederick Madison Allen, and in 1919, Allen developed a very low-calorie, low-carbohydrate diet to treat diabetes, known as the starvation diet. Although this diet was extremely restrictive and difficult to follow, it was one of the first attempts to control diabetes through diet before the discovery of insulin. Lulu Hunt Peters. She was an American physician and writer known for popularizing the concept of counting calories as a method of weight loss. His most famous book, Diet and Health, with the Key to Calories, published in 1918, was the first weight loss book to become a bestseller. Dr. Richard Mackernas was a British psychiatrist known for his work on low-carb diets and food allergies. These techniques were part of his clinical ecology approach, which sought to treat psychiatric and physical illnesses through the identification and removal of allergens in the patient's diet and environment. His 1958 bestseller, Eat Fat and Grow Slim. Dr. Robert Atkins was an American physician and cardiologist, best known for developing the Atkins diet, a low-carb diet that became very popular in the 1970s. The Atkins diet is based on the idea that reducing carbohydrate intake and increasing protein and fat consumption can help with weight loss and improved health. Although the diet has been controversial and has received criticism from some sectors of the medical community, it has also had a large following and has influenced other low-carb diets. Dr. Richard K. Bernstein is a physician and advocate of the low-carb diet for diabetes management. Bernstein is known for his focus on maintaining normal blood glucose levels through a strict low-carb diet and small doses of insulin. His most famous book, Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution, offers a detailed guide to diabetes management and has helped many people improve their glycemic control, published in 1997. Dr. Michael Eads is an American physician and author known for his work in the field of low-carb nutrition. Together with his wife, Dr. Mary Dan Eads, he wrote the book Protein Power, which became a national and international bestseller. This book, published in 1996, promotes a high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet for weight loss and improved metabolic health. The impressive thing is that there are plenty of authors from ancient times who explain the importance of knowing how to balance food. Knowing how to moderate what causes us the most problems due to the abuse in its intake are mainly sugars and starches. Linus Pauling was a chemist and biochemist, one of the few individuals to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different categories. Already at the end of 1950, he explains that one gets sick not because one is old or because one has a bad gene, but because of the lack of nutrients and minerals in his study. Mineral deficiency and diseases. Pauling believed that many diseases and ailments could be traced back to a mineral deficiency. Well-known examples of calcium and magnesium deficiency are high blood pressure, joint pain, and muscle aches. Due to lack of copper, you will have hemorrhoids and varicose veins and aortic aneurysm. Due to a lack of vanadium and chromium, you will have sugar problems and diabetes. These examples can be interpolated to more than 72 minerals and other nutrients. Japanese biologist Yoshinori Osumi received the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016 for his discoveries about the mechanisms of cellular autophagy. Autophagy is a process by which aged cells are recycled to reuse their elements, which is crucial for cell renewal. This process is especially important when cells need energy or nutrients, such as in situations of fasting or calorie restriction. Simply put, to renew cells efficiently, you must fast to stimulate the cell regeneration process. This important study proves that eating 3 times a day and eating snacks is not the healthiest thing for the body. Draw the conclusions for yourself. In all areas of life, there is good and evil, and medicine is no exception. Although it is the minority that exercises the profession in a malignant way, there have existed and still exist monsters who wear a white coat and have or had a black soul. In Nazi Germany, a doctor became famous for his atrocious experiments on humans. His name was Dr. Joseph Mengele, the angel of death of the Auschwitz concentration camp. Thousands of people died under the most cruel and inhumane experiments imaginable. Apparently, the white coat does not make you a good person. In 2015, Dr. Farid Fata was imprisoned in the United States. A monster of chilling magnitudes, almost diabolical for its coldness and cynicism. The doctor had diagnosed more than 553 patients with false positives for cancer. And even though they were actually healthy people and had no disease, 475 people did not survive chemotherapy treatments. That is, the doctor murdered those people for all the money he obtained, since the pharmaceutical and medical industries are very expensive in that area. More than $225 million was fraudulently billed for Medicare insurance, of which $17 million went to the doctor. The incredible thing is that the commissions of money from the pharmaceutical industry to doctors are legal and are not seen as an economic convenience to the detriment of what the patient really needs. The saddest thing is to understand that the survival margin in these treatments is less than 5%. The latter is corroborated by seeing the testimonies of many doctors who bravely expose realities and statistics of survival that few want to talk about since they do not care. In the case of Dr. Fata, the prosecution asked for 175 years in prison, but the sentence was only 45 years. Many survivors were left with permanent damage to much of their organs, nervous system, and infertility. Do you think the penalty or punishment is proportional to the damage caused? Another famous character who sold illegal drugs for money was drug lord Pablo Escobar. And under his reign of terror, thousands of people died directly and indirectly. The irony in this case is that he said that he was sincere and did not need to be a hypocrite, since in his wickedness he was aware of his intentions and the evil he caused, at the expense of the multimillion-dollar empire he managed, and that the liars were the ones who promised falsehoods. The reward given by the US government for his capture was $5 million, and compared to Osama bin Laden, it was $25 million. It seems to be less risky and more economically profitable to be a corrupt oncologist, who in the end, like mafiosi, do not leave living witnesses. Incredible news. To err is human, according to a 2016 article by the BBC and Los Angeles Times. They explain that the third leading cause of death in the United States and the rest of the world was due to medical errors, and that the first and second causes were cancer and heart attacks. And they conclude that more than 250,000 to 400,000 people a year die due to doctor errors, and these studies were published in the British Medical Journal, among other publications. I comment on this because of the case of Dr. Fata, since he benefited for many years protected by the wide margin of error and fatality that cancer treatments by chemotherapy and radiation have, which today do not make sense. And thanks to the research Dr. Thomas Siegfried, it was irrefutably proven that cancer is 99% a metabolic dysfunction due to the loss of phosphorus capacity of the mitochondria, mainly, and that all cancer begins with the adaptation of changing breathing for fermentation to generate energy. And the main fermentation fuels are sugars and the amino acid glutamine, which has fermentative capacity. Therefore, the best way to solve this disease is to eliminate the myth and mysteries that derive from the designation of cancer as a genetic disease, and treat it like metabolic disease as studies indicate. I want to mention the case that for me is the number one in producing deaths due to a bad practice that derives from money and fame sponsored by the unmentionable industry, avoiding censorship, in order to create a dependent and sick population. It is the myth about cholesterol levels and their relationship with heart problems. Physiologist and cell Benjamin Keyes to counter the studies and the best-selling book by Dr. Richard Mackernas and his proposal on his low-carb diet, similar to the Paleolithic protein and fat-based diet Eat Fat and Grow Slim in 1958. He was entrusted with the task where his sponsors were from the sugar industry to deny and demonize that work. His interest in the relationship between blood cholesterol and cardiovascular disease began in 1949. He contributed to disseminating the results of his studies, which were very controversial because of the manipulation of the data in order to show the results he wanted to obtain to the detriment of the truth. The cardiac incident statistics he used were for only 6 countries, ignoring 14 nations that the data did not support his hypothesis about the effect of saturated fats on the incidence of heart disease. Ansel Keys was turned by the media into a celebrity. He was called Mr. Cholesterol. He was on many radio and television programs and was even on the cover of Times magazine. In this way, cholesterol was turned into something dangerous, which it is not. Alessandro Minaudi was one of the principal investigators of the 7-country study, dedicated to the Italian population. 25 years later, in 1999, he again reviewed the information of the study subjects. He noticed that the category of foods that best related to coronary mortality, heart attacks, was sweet foods. The consequences of that ruse were and have been the premature death of hundreds of millions of people to date from heart failure. It has also influenced the accelerated deterioration of the brain, such as Alzheimer's, among other problems of the nervous system, also Parkinson's and hormonal problems of all kinds, including impotence. And this is easy to understand. It's not rocket science. Neurons or cells of the nervous system are made up of a very high percentage of cholesterol, more than 40% per neuron. Most hormones are created from cholesterol, such as testosterone, so with low cholesterol impotence occurs. There are countless very serious studies that indicate that there is no relationship between a cholesterol level of 300 and heart attacks. In fact, plaques and obstructions are usually calcium, and cholesterol is the means used by the human body to cover lesions and fissures in the arteries. That is the reason for finding accumulated cholesterol in the basal system mainly. What is evident, knowing the scientific tests, the levels recommended by academia and the hospital system are 190, which is good for business and bad for health. I recommend you read the book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, by Dr. Johnny Bowden and Dr. Stephen Sinatra. And if you still have doubts, you can read the book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, Dr. George's Ed, a highly regarded psychiatrist who explains the mental problems caused by low cholesterol levels. On the other hand, well-known doctors explain the issue on social networks. I recommend researching. I think the pharmaceutical industry is something important and good. The bad thing is not supervising and controlling it. But it seems that money always comes first, up to a certain level you can understand. The pharmaceutical company Pfizer was founded in 1849 by cousins Charles Pfizer and Charles F. Earhart, German immigrants who settled in Brooklyn, New York. Since then, beyond being at the top of the industry, for nothing have created any cure for any disease since then. They've just been very successful entrepreneurs selling medicine, and the reason is simple. Creating a permanent cure is not good business. So, don't expect anything different from pharmaceutical companies. To explain more would be to treat them as fools. Another very common issue that impacts many is the use of fluoride as an antibiotic, because both in water and in the mouth its function is to poison microorganisms in order to eliminate them. The complicated thing is that the human body does not work or use fluoride out of necessity. In fact, it is a powerful neurotoxin that damages the nervous system by decreasing its capacities and destroys the thyroid, which is a very important gland in the body. It is so much so that in the Second World War, the Germans and Stalin in the Soviet Union supplied doses of fluoride in the water used by the prisoners in order to keep the prison population more passive and sterile, because they have a much lower sperm count, and thanks to their cognitive decline, which makes us more foolish and slow thinking. As past president of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, Dr. Kennedy explains the detrimental consequences of fluoride use in the water supply. The damage occurs not only to humans due to its toxicity, but also destroys part of the soil and its ability to nourish plants properly. Thyroid damage occurs with trace levels of fluoride that is fully proven by science. And the issue is not changed by delays and legal provisions that have nothing to do with the facts and their consequences. The doctor explains that if kidneys are in optimal function, approximately 50% of the fluoride that is taken is confused with other minerals and is deposited in the bones. In the medium or long term, this leads to more brittle bones. But if your kidneys work slower, the damage to your body will begin with the destruction of your thyroid. A notorious example in Canada comparing the city of Toronto that supplies fluoride to water and the city of Vancouver does not. In Toronto, the statistics brittle bones and tooth decay far exceed the statistics. Not to mention the level of development of children's health, both physically and mentally compared to Vancouver, having generally very similar habits. In fact, it is a co-helper in the water to more easily absorb the heavy metals that it may contain. Isn't that amazing? Now imagine the damage from consuming higher doses of fluoride on a daily and regular basis present in toothpaste. This topic is explained in more detail by Dr. Nathan Bryan, an expert on nitric oxide issues, saying that oral dysbiosis and its relationship with heart attacks are due to the systematic disruption of biofilm or oral bacterial flora. And after 25 years of advanced studies, it explains the damage by removing and sterilizing the mouth. If you want more in-depth information on the subject, it is recommended to watch Chapter 012 of our series. In 1997, a very important study conducted at the University of Surrey in England found that the soft tissue of the pineal gland in adults contains more fluoride than any other tissue in the human body, producing calcification by calcium phosphate crystals in the gland. This is very serious as we can lose the ability to produce melatonin, losing the ability to regulate the natural cycle of sleep and wakefulness, altering in turn the body's regenerative capacity. This impacts our mental health. The accumulation of fluoride in the pineal gland has been associated with various neurological diseases, including autism, depression, Parkinson's, and cognitive functions such as learning and memory. Do not let yourselves be indulging by the learned despair within or by other people who, like birds of ill omen, preach defeatism. If you liked the video and want to help spread this information, remember to click on the bell and subscribe to receive more information like this. Remember that step by step we can improve. The worst thing is to do nothing. Invisible friends see you in the mirror.